Thank you, Mr. Swank. I want to welcome everybody again to services today. It's a wonderful day out, nice and warm. We're really getting into the summer now. The heat's coming up. The gardens are coming in fairly well. Enjoying ourselves. We just come off of a great Pentecost weekend down in Brown County. It was a wonderful service, lots of wonderful music, and lots of wonderful fellowship. In this life, we make choices. We're faced with all kinds of choices and the types of people we want to become. I have faced many choices in my life, throughout the entirety of my life. Some choices I've done well with. Some choices were not always handled the best way. But all these choices have led me to where I am today, to be the person who I am today. Whether these be big decisions or small choices, they have all had an impact on my life, and they have all affected me in different ways. Even not making a decision is a decision. You decided to leave it up to someone else's choices. The same can be said for everyone who's listening to this message. Every choice that you've made, every chance you've had to go one way, to the left or to the right, to go down the center path, to follow or not follow, is a choice that has led you to where you are today. The things that you have done, the things you have not done, these are all part of who we are. Whether they be good or whether they be bad, the depth of these decisions is within our hearts. Why we make these decisions is really what God looks at. What is in the depth of our heart to impact us in how we make these decisions? God sees how we weigh our choices in our hearts. He knows even doing the right thing for the wrong reason is not necessarily a good choice. Our anguish or lack of anguish is always known to Him. Following God's law and guarding ourselves from sin must be part of when we make decisions. When I started to consider this subject, I was startled to see how far-reaching some of my decisions actually were. How an ancient, in my mind at least, decision affects me even today. I have even found that I was called before I had an inkling that God even knew who I was. If we turn to 2 Thessalonians, it talks about this. 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. And verse 13. But we ought always to thank God for you, brothers, loved by the Lord, because from the beginning God chose you to be saved through the sanctifying work of the Spirit and through the belief in the truth. So God knew from the beginning He wanted me to be where I am today. In all the steps that I was throughout that path, He knew exactly where I needed to be. And God has given me trials and tests at every turn of my life. From the very young age, through my teens, and into adulthood, I have always been tested. Along with these tests and trials have been the tools to solve them. They're always there for me to use or to not use. I have all these choices to do or do not do, to use and to not use. How do I know this is true? Well, let me get back in my Wayback Machine. Some of you may remember that Peabody and Sherman used to travel in the Wayback Machine, and they would go and visit the past and see what was going on. Or is it more like a quantum leap, where I travel back in the past to my own life, throughout my own past and my own experiences, to see things that happened at that time? I travel back in my lifetime, and as I do that, I can see the choices I have made. So what was I like as a child? Come with me now, and maybe you'll see some of yourself in how I lived. Growing up, when I was beginning to learn about the truth about God, I only knew what was taught in a small little Methodist church that my grandparents went to and attended. Even though I did not attend that one regularly, being a military brat as I was, only infrequently when we were in the area visiting or when Dad was PCS'd out and we lived in the area. But it was a small Methodist church in the town of Greentown, Indiana. And I remember every time we would go to services, we would walk to services with my grandmother. Services began, I remember, with hymn singing and with prayer. The music would uplift them the same way that I feel here in this church, but there would always Sunday school. Remember, it wasn't a Sabbath church, it was a Sunday church. They would talk about to the children, and we would learn lessons about Christ, about Moses, and the holidays that were kept by the Methodist Church. I know that what they kept was what they believed and what they saw and what God had them understand. This is not necessarily the full truth, but it's what they kept. Also, God's commandments were taught, and the golden rule. The golden rule has always been to treat others as you would want them to be, as you would want them to treat you. To know right from wrong, to learn how to treat people as they should be treated, with the respect and honor that they deserve. The infrequency of our visits, and as I recall, my father nor my grandfather attending with us, were all that I was given for the importance of church attendance at that time. Yet even when I was not at church, these two rules of how to act and treat others stayed with me. My parents ingrained them into us. Even though my dad didn't attend church, he knew about the golden rule, and he knew you needed to treat people the way they should be treated. These concepts were instilled in all 6 of us children. So I was part of a larger family. I was right in the middle. 2 older brothers, 2 younger brothers, twin sister. So I was right smack in the middle. But sometimes it felt like I was just an afterthought. In order to get the daughter, they had to take another son to go with it. Okay? But then I would find my parents see me without me even knowing it. There was one day when I was in about 4th or 5th grade, and at the time we lived in Myrtle Beach, so I spent the day at the pool. That was the regular thing. You went to the pool, you stayed there all day. We were all tan. How could you not be tan and live in Myrtle Beach? But during one of the rest breaks, because once an hour, they pulled everybody out of the pool so the lifeguards could rest, so that everybody could rest, I went ahead and went over to the BX. The BX, for some people that don't know it, is the base exchange. Think of a Walmart. You just run next door, run in, grab a candy bar. I even made it back before the break was done, sat down and rested for a few minutes. But when I got home that night, and my dad got home, he goes, "Well, how was your trip to the BX?" And I'm like, well, how could he even know I was there? I didn't see him. I didn't see any of my friends or family there, family friends there. There's no way I thought that he could even know I was there. Well, this was a way for him to show me that he was always looking out for me. He always saw me. He always knew what was going on in my life. He always took care of me. When I was much younger than this, even once when I was even younger than this, he did as in the parable of the lost sheep. In Luke 15, turn there, verses 4 and 5, Christ is talking about lost sheep. And he says, "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them." Now there are only 6 of us, but bear with me. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders. Well, what he did was, we were on our way back from California, and we decided we were going to have lunch. So we stopped at the rest stop that's right smack dab in the middle of Death Valley. So we're in the rest area, sitting at the picnic tables, having lunch, watching out for rattlesnakes because they like to come and hide in the shade. And when we were done, my parents said, "Okay, anybody that needs to use the restroom, this is your chance before we get back on the road." So I went to the restroom. When I came out, my family and everybody were gone. 5 years old. It was not a great feeling. But there was a nice Oriental family that came, sat me down, calmed me down, took care of me for a little while. And after a little while, here comes my dad running across 6 lanes of interstate to come and get me. He throws me on his shoulders, carries me 6 lanes back, and we get in the car and we go back. So he came after his lost sheep until he found me in Death Valley. And he carried me on his shoulders across the interstate. This is the same way God looks out for us. God sees us getting lost in this world, and he searches for us to bring us back. I've been lost many times in this world and had to come back to God. By this, God shows me that he cares for me also. Not all the choices I made were what God wanted me to do. As a young teen, I fell away from God and Christ. Mostly this showed through my school years. Even though my older brother and my sister were in honor society, I chose not to apply myself. I barely passed my classes. I was a CB, DC student all the way through high school. I just didn't apply myself. This sloth-like behavior grew about because of envy. I'm positive that I was jealous of my siblings and how well they were doing and how well I wasn't pushed to do better. But my open envy was for the jocks and for the popular rebels in the school. I looked up to them, and they looked down on nerds. Back then, when I was in school, nerds was a bad term. Now we embrace that term. Okay? And as luck would have it, how did God reward my actions back then? Of course, he made me a rock star, king of the football field. No, he didn't. I was not an athletic superstar. I was teased mercilessly by those who I set up as my idols. I looked up to them, and they looked down on me. These desires were not in God's plan for me, but this shows the rewards that we get from any idols that we put before God. Emptiness and loss are usually the end result. We're not going to get fantastic rewards for when we do these things that are not what God wants. Emptiness and loss. When I chose to do what was right, to study and treat others with respect, that's when the rewards came in. Was I popular? No. Yet, I was happier, and my heart was content. I was doing what needed to be done. I was doing it in a way that pleased God, and I was happy and content. What other reward does anyone need? But again, as life would have it, as a single adult, I again fell away from doing what was right. By that time, I was part of the workforce, if you can call it work. I was a lifeguard at one of the local swim pools or at one of the local swim parks, depending on where I was on a particular day. I'm sure that most people in the room, especially the adults, know some of the temptations there are at working at a pool. Those are nothing compared to where it can lead a weak heart. I was looking for 2 things at this time: someone to spend my life with and a good church to spend my time in. The rewards I got for that were seeing a lot of decent churches, and then one that pulled me away from God even farther than I'd ever been before. When my first wife and I divorced, it was because our faith and our lives were self-centered. Our life was only centered on us. It was always me. It wasn't we. It wasn't us. My life did not turn around until I started putting others before myself again. I began to see what doing for others gave them. Oh, I was rewarded as well, happy and content. Only then did God give me a chance to come back to him. No matter what, God always had a plan for me, and he still does. I can live my life for him, or I can live my life for the rewards for myself. The rewards he has given me are more than this unworthy sinner deserves. I have a life. I have a job. I have a family, a beautiful family to spend my time with. I have a beautiful church family to hang out with. The only way to live right is to follow the 2 greatest commandments. In Mark chapter 12, it reads, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Caring about God and others must be at the core of what we believe. It is as much how we feel as what we do that God sees. If we do what is right simply because it's what it says here in the book, that's not enough. It needs to be what is right in here. We need to be doing this because it is the right thing to do and because it is what we want to do. God sees this, and as for me, I choose life, God's life, with my heart, my soul, my mind, and all my strength. What do you choose?